Good morning, everybody. We're starting at 11 o'clock. A glorious British summertime today. I don't know where you are in the world, but it's been quite a week actually for weather in the UK. It's been very exciting, from thunderstorms, hailstones to sweltering heat. It's been a good week. So it's just a couple of minutes before 11, couple of seconds before 11 in actual fact, so we're nearly ready to start. Just a few bits and pieces for your information. As it says below, there's a live blog roll below. If you want to join in the chat, please feel free. It's possible, my colleagues and I are colleagues certainly, and not I am, are on the chat roll, so you'll be able to touch base with us, ask us questions, and we'll be able to respond to those as we go. To make this a little bit more interactive, as it says here, if you have some issues around sound, just make sure you check your speakers, and a link will be sent after the webinar. So those of you who want to look at it again, or if you missed it the first time around, you'll be able to watch it from the beginning. And if you want to touch base with us, talk more, discuss anything, please feel free to drop a line to me directly at russell@qedod.com, or to the rest of the gang at info@qedod.com. So I think we're ready to rock and roll. Dear me, that ages me somewhat, doesn't it? I think we're ready to start, so let's get underway. So this morning's webinar is an examination of, or the beginning of an examination of what we call our ropes method. And R for ropes is a regulation. So we're going to have a look at a bit of a deeper, slightly more of a deep dive about this subject. Now we have, we're building a number of online courses, and we really go into this subject in a lot of depth in our and those courses, which will be on Udemy later in the year or directly from our site. But this should give you a bit of a taster of what it's all about. So as you see, the plan, a bit about us, a bit of a recap, a bit of a look at this regulation idea, and then a discussion about next steps. I think regulation is a really interesting area, and one for whom people who are interested in the more psychological side of resilience might find more interesting. So as you know, in the past we've focused on performance, we're focused on making the most of our potential. We've got a range of toolkits and strategies that help you, and we run workshops for organizations, we do coaching, both in organizations or one-to-one, and as I said earlier, we're building a number of online resources, and we have a free ebook which you can go onto our website and access, other webinars, and some new podcasts which are just being launched. We're up to number 4 so far, and we have another 5 or 6 in the pipeline, one of which is the new resilience measurement indicator, which we're hosting on behalf of the Middlesex University life psychology department. So more about that at a later date, but there's some really interesting things coming up. So let's just refresh this. We've talked a bit about this in the past, so we know that resilience is not just about bouncing back, but it's about dealing with stress, pressure in the moment, making sure your performance doesn't suffer, understand the gear changes which are needed before the pressure and stress starts, and building your overall capacity. So resilience, it's interesting, actually it is an engineering term, and so is pressure and stress in a sense, and the issue is, of course, that we use an analogy or not, sometimes the meanings get slightly differentiated when we start to talk about personal resilience. We know improved resilience means these things, and from a leadership management perspective, if you want a better team, with better innovation, more creative disagreement, then resilience means you can have people who will be able to engage in those things without getting bent out of shape. So that could be good. And this is our toolkit, which we're going to dive into a bit more. We've talked about these things before. The idea of building your potential through those 4 areas, and then using this toolkit to be able to take those areas and translate it into performance. So we look at resilience through these lenses of either regulation, optimism, purpose, energy, or stamina. And today is regulation, which is great if you feel like this. There you go. So let's say, what is regulation? And for me, it's the balance between self-awareness and self-management. And these things are a balance. There are people in the world who have a huge self-awareness, really do know themselves very well, incredibly in touch with themselves, They can describe their feelings, their emotions, their thoughts, all sorts of things, but they can't translate that into action. I've met people in the past, and in fact, I've worked with people who are extraordinarily self-aware, but it doesn't actually change their behaviour. And the reverse is also true. I've worked with people who are quite good at managing themselves, but with little self-awareness. So in a sense, this is the core or the heart of some of the development of our sort of personal competencies, because getting these two things organised allows you to increase your performance. So I'm very aware at the moment of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, not always happy with the outcome, but being aware is part of the issue. And of course, as I'm aware, if I can, I will change and amend what I do as I go. I wish I hadn't set myself up for like that now, because there could be problems ahead. So, okay, let's look a little bit more at this self-awareness idea. So, self-awareness is about knowing yourself, being able to audit yourself, to be able to almost get an external view of yourself, but from within. So it's about knowing your feelings, knowing how you feel, and actually recognizing that the feelings you have in your body are important and are acceptable because they are giving you information often about your emotions. So, for example, if you feel as if you've got butterflies in your tummy and your mouth's dry and you can feel that your mental acuity is dropping, we often describe that as feeling nervous. And a feeling in that sense is very different from a thought, which is actually we're thinking we're nervous, but actually our body isn't indicating that, so we're probably not. So be able to understand how our body works and literally understand the feelings within our body is really important. And of course, the feelings in our body are really important in terms of our health. So, for example, having itchy feet is an interesting thing. Having losing the sort of fine motor skills in the end of your fingers can mean that you're nervous, or it can mean that you might have something like a condition that needs to be looked at. So you need to be aware of your body. I mean, there are some people in the world who are hyper aware of their bodies, and they're so angst-ridden about things that they actually can't operate. But this is just about a healthy awareness of your feelings. And a healthy awareness of your emotions. Your emotions are there to help you. Your emotions are there to understand or help you make sense of the world and help you take action. People call this the fight or flight reaction. But emotions can range from fear, anger, anxiety, disgust, so for some people joy, and for other people, of course, grief is a major emotion as well. And these translate into giving us toolkits and ways of operating in the world to protect us. So our emotions are there for our self-good, in a way. It's only when our emotions go to kilter relative to the threat that we're facing do we have an issue. However, we need to know where our emotions are running and take account of them, because our emotions are powerful things and have powerful after effects in our bodies, and of course they affect our performance. If we're the sort of person that's prone to anger, it will be difficult for us to build more sustainable relationships and to be able to be sufficiently analytical about our work and performance if we're constantly flying off the handle, for example. Now, that anger thing is useful because it's meant to help us be able to determine threat. But if it goes out of kilter, and you've either driven it out of kilter or it has become out of kilter for some reason, then it's something you need to be aware of so you can manage your effect on other people. What we say is important. We should listen to what we say because our words and our language gives us clues to our psychology. What's interesting about what we say is how we express ourselves in the word. It gives us and other people clues about our true intentions. Psychologists often talk about this word try. If someone says the word, I'm going to try and do that, that often means that they're not going to do that, but they're going to fail manfully in the event. They're going to take lots of effort, but the fact that they haven't actually achieved what they set out to achieve, they can justify it by saying, well, I tried really hard. So what we say is really important, and knowing the sort of linguistic triggers or cues we use can give us an advantage when we start to think about changing our behaviour. And whilst we also have this external monologue, we also, for some people, have an inner monologue. Now this is the one which unconsciously wangs on at us when we, for example, make a mistake, and it says, "You fool, how could you have done that? You're always doing things like that." We often describe it as our sort of critical parent working against us. And this sort of inner dialogue that we have that seems to be just running sometimes is the thing that actually can make us unduly self-critical. It often comes from a sort of perfectionist state or an overly controlling state. And because we're building our self-awareness, we have to recognize that if we're overly critical of ourselves, we can actually make ourselves feel worse. So getting a balance of our inner criticism and our inner perfectionist drive can be a thing to help us feel better about ourselves. If we have unrealistic expectations of about what good is, in other words, it doesn't have to always be perfect, it just has to be good enough, that can help us deal with the way we think about standards and how we judge quality of work or quality of relationships or anything. And also how we think about things in a more conscious way. If some people say things like, well, I've come to work today and I had a terrible journey, that's the end of today. Oh, it's going to be one of those days. And the way we think about the world drives, again, some of our behaviours. And we sometimes need to catch our thoughts. And sometimes the thoughts are linked to the unconscious inner voice. And those, as it pokes into sort of more of a conscious level, how we think about things, how we give ourselves the ability to say, well, okay, I've got a meeting today. I expect it to be terrible. Or I expect it to go well, or I expect it to be, taking a more realistic view of how we think about things can help us. If you're overly perfectionist, you think it has to be brilliant to be a success. You always fall short of that, and then your inner voice can tell you how hopeless you are. So getting a grip of 2 or 3 of these sort of reinforcing systems allows you to build your awareness, and that can only be a healthy thing. And of course, one of the things you're trying to do at a behavioural level is understand the sort of habits you have, the sort of patterns, routines you've developed for yourself to make life easier for yourself. And they can be very good habits, of course, and things which are good because they produce positive outcomes for yourself. But in work, we often have habits which are about maybe being a bit more destructive, or trying to wind someone up on a regular sort of basis, or basically any sort of habit over which you're unconscious is something that you need to be simply aware of. It's always an interesting technique to come home and sit in a different chair and always have a go at sleeping on the odd side of the bed and see what your partner thinks of that change of habit. And be aware, of course, of your body, because your body and your health go together. Now, so what you're trying to do is to know yourself, to catch yourself, to see yourself through almost like an external lens looking in on yourself. Because the reason for self-awareness is to be able to build self-awareness, but also to be able to affect what you do next. So building self-awareness for the sake of it isn't so good, because all you can do yourself is drive yourself a bit nuts. But what you really want to do is to think about self-awareness so you can raise it and change your behaviours, as I say. So let's look at this first of all, building it. There are, I like using instruments. I was a fan from a very early age of the Cosmopolitan magazine Get to Know Yourself questionnaires. Thoroughly enjoyed them ideas as well. And of course, as you go further through life, you bump into better tools. I've personally used Strength Finder 2.0, which I think is a very good tool for understanding strengths. And it's a very sort of positive psychology way of looking at the world to find your strengths and make more of them. FIRO-B is a very interesting tool. It has a good way of looking at the world, but pretty well anything will do. And I do remember working with a team once and discussing horoscopes. It didn't really matter the fact, what the instrument was, it's what we did with it, that was the key. In fact, we have our own resilience toolkits you can use, and you can drop us a line, we'll make some arrangements for that to happen. But we're also putting together a really very interesting scientific approach to resilience and self-awareness, which is coming soon. But of course, it's not always what we do well in the workplace or in life, and our own perception of it. We need feedback. And the problem is, some people get enormously bent out of shape about feedback. Some people don't want it, some people don't like it, some people don't care about it, but it's a useful thing. And the problem is that if you see all feedback as criticism, and maybe if you're a perfectionist, every time you see feedback is a way of beating yourself up, then that's not useful. But we need to recognise that people give us feedback, and it's up to us to see, to attribute whether that's a positive or a useful piece of feedback or something we see as changing something that's a weakness. So it's as useful to know what we're doing well and how we can get better at that, even better at that, as it is to know where our performance is going off track, or what we're doing might not be adding value. It's important to know both of those things. And as I say to most people, if you're doing something which is irritating everybody and you could easily change it, wouldn't you rather know? But we get bent out of shape about this idea of feedback. And then, of course, people get uncomfortable about giving feedback because they're not so sure about receiving it. And then we have this whole sort of problem which gets out of kilter when no one's really building anyone's self-awareness. Mindfulness is very groovy. It's a very new idea about being able to understand and close down some of the thinking, your unhelpful thoughts you have in your body. And of course, self-reflect. Think about the impacts you've had on other people. What did that mean? What does that say to you? And then you can use a couple of techniques to help you think, well, what did I do today? What went well? And what will I change? And what will I do differently next time round? Or use a gap analysis. What did I want to do? What did I get? What was the size of the gap? How will I close it next time round? So remember, self-awareness is there for a reason, to affect our self-management. And self-management is our choices that we make about our feelings, emotions, and thoughts. It's about knowing what they are and affecting a change if you want to, if it has some use, if it gets you a better outcome. And it's also about driving better attitudes and mindsets. And key for this, of course, is to drive behaviors and results. So if you're feeling terrible about yourself all the time, self-awareness will allow you to make choices about how you feel about yourself. If you have habits which are not getting a good, useful set of relationships with other people, your self-awareness will help you be able to judge what you need to do differently relative to that person to be able to affect that relationship. And the key for all these things is you don't start with the other person and all their faults and issues. You can start with yourself, because that's the easiest thing to begin to change. So self-management is about making conscious choices. And of course, the more we can bring those choices to be in our conscious mind, then it's less habitual and we have a better chance of changing it. And as again, of course, one of the key things about self-management is to affect our actual levels of self-awareness. So there's a beautiful sort of positive reinforcement curve between building awareness, making better choices, and feeding that back into our awareness curves. So we can take some very simple steps which are described in some of our books and some of our resources. We can breathe better, we can sleep better, we can particularly look at techniques to manage our emotions. These are all going to come in later webinars, but there are techniques to help you manage fear, and fear is a good thing to have because it's manageable in the moment, how to manage our anger, and more importantly, how to manage anxiety. Anxiety is the biggest issue of all in our sort of modern culture, and how we learn to deal with anxiety is a real key for us. And the first thing of all is to know the levels of anxiety we have and check they're relative to the challenges and threats which we are perceiving about us. And a lot of people's anxiety filters can go out of sync with the threat level of the external world. And you can even build up something that's called a general anxiety disorder. And these things are possible to fix using things like cognitive behavioral therapy or simple breathing and mindfulness techniques. So depending where you are on that curve, you can actually start to help yourself. It's interesting how we're seeing the rise of more general anxiety in youngsters, and particularly sort of college students, university students. And part of that is the perspective of life, the sort of where they are in their lives. I was talking to someone who's doing a second degree, it's 22, 23, and her saying basically she was completely blown out, knocked out of shape when she was doing that. But now she was 30, she had life perspective to be able to look back at that and see relative to what was actually going around at the time. That level of intensity, that level of self-imposed pressure was such that it created a level of anxiety because she'd never experienced anything more stressful. And so part of becoming wiser and more mature and having more conscious experience in life is to be able to build the level of choice we can take and then therefore affect our positive outcomes. Sleeps better, again, more mindfulness. Build relationships as well with people who add value to you. There's nothing nicer than be able to go out with people who you can either talk to and share your feelings and emotions, have a good gossip about that, but also people where you can just laugh. In fact, I went out with some friends of ours on Sunday, and we just laughed. And it's so therapeutic. And actually, physiology, it's very helpful for us to laugh. It almost purges bits of our body in a particular way. So laughter is often seen as the best medicine. Well, certainly in terms of anxiety and your emotional states, it really is. It helps you sort of reset your brain in a funny sort of way. It purges some of the oxygenation systems as well. So highly recommended. In fact, in some hospitals in the 70s, 80s and 90s, there were lots of studies done on recuperation rates with people looking at and laughing more. And there's some real positive indicators about that. And of course, self-management is all about the results you're getting. If you're getting what you want, then the self-management is working. And again, more self-management, more awareness. So, for example, we talked about in a recent blog about managing the sort of thing that was going on with the Brexit change and people who were going through the grief curve. And we talked about avoiding toxic people, working more with successful people or hanging around successful people, avoiding sort of media influences where people were moaning and grinding and sort of, sharing their sort of fears and worries. And of course, that raises your emotional anxiety levels. So, sometimes just avoiding those things are, sensible strategies. If you're worried about the future because you're anxious again, making sure that you know what the reality is important. So you review your finances, you know where your cash position is. And when if you're getting unduly pessimistic about the world, you become more realistically optimistic. And the key thing of all, if you're, you need to do something. And sometimes in self-reflection, we can spend a bit too much time oming and sitting at the top of a mountainside rather than sometimes just getting out and doing stuff, taking risks and having some fun. So regulation is really all about the blend between how you know yourself better and how you translate that into your actions. And remember that what you believe to be true often comes true because our brain finds a way of dealing with that. So the more self-awareness we want to build, the more opportunities we will notice to build that self-awareness. So that's an introduction into this idea of regulation, one of my favourite subjects. And we've got some free resources. We've got the book Resilience Unravelled, which myself and Claire Carris have written together as a bit of a primer, an introduction. It's a free ebook. You can download it from our site. Please feel free to do so. The questions and answers are rolling below. I know my colleagues are answering those on Chatroll. I think there's some being discussion going on at the moment. Any other questions you have for me, you can email me directly at russell@qedod.com, and you can have a look at Resilience News on our website, and you can see which other resources. And please check out our podcasts. Until the next podcast, thanks very much.